Okay, thank you, Ryan and Mayor Bibb, for that inspiring conversation. We pivot now to the next stage of our program, and it's clear that creating high-quality educational opportunities is a fundamental part of a freedom agenda, as Debbie was talking about earlier. In that poll that she discussed early this morning, 81% of respondents said that supporting freedom means government should increase access to education. But what policies are needed to deal with the challenging moment for our schools, a moment when so many students have not recovered from falling behind during the pandemic, when an education beyond high school is more important than ever, and when we are dealing with difficult politics around education issues. The New Deal Forum is pleased to partner with Education Reform Now, a sister organization of Democrats for Education Reform, to explore these questions over the next couple of days in our next panel and in a breakout session tomorrow on education messaging. It is my pleasure to kick off that programming by introducing the CEO of Democrats for Education Reform, a longtime New Dealer and a leader in policy in this space as the former mayor of Providence, Rhode Island, Jorge Elorza. Mayor, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I just want to say before I jump into the presentation, I want to share how excited I am to be here today. I still remember the first time I came to a New Deal gathering for the very first time. And I remember just reaching out and meeting so many of the other elected officials that gathered throughout the country. And I truly felt as though I was with my tribe. And so this is an organization that I always valued when I was in elected office. And I want to just thank Debbie and her team, along with Helen Milby, one of the co-founders of the organization, for this partnership that we have at the moment, and certainly one that we want to grow in the years to come. It really, really is great being here. So, relating to the work that we do in education, part of the reason why I've always loved this organization so much, you and I are around elected officials on a constant basis. And I think it's fair to say that, I found that in terms of elected officials, there are folks that have long and quote-unquote successful careers, but probably don't get much of anything done in those long careers. And then there are elected officials, as Mayor Bibb was sort of just channeling, that on the second day on the job, you feel as though you're running out of time. You have a purpose. You're in these positions because you're out to get stuff done. That is what I believe comes to signify at New Deal. So we're excited to share with you a little bit about our organization and explore how we can work together in the months and years to come. So a little bit of what we're going to go through. Want to just give you a sense of the current education landscape, introduce you to our organization, and talk about what lies ahead. So first things first, there is an education crisis. And I want to focus on the policy side of that education crisis. There's a crisis because we have to match where we are to our why. Why are we here, and why do we do what we do? The reality is that when education is done right, it's the great equalizer in society. When it's not done right, it's probably the greatest source of inequality in our society. And the truth is that in so many places, it's not being done right. I'll give you one stat. I'll talk about my city, the city of Providence. Can you believe that in the city of Providence, at traditional high schools, only 2.4% of high school seniors are doing math at grade level? 2.4%. And we can debate the merits of standardized testing, et cetera, but I think we can all agree that 2.5% is simply unacceptable. It's indefensible. And as we scan throughout the country, Providence isn't the only one, and Providence is probably not even the worst. It really is a crisis across the map. We're literally leaving kids and communities behind. Now, just one point on this. This is not to demean or denigrate all of the amazing work that practitioners, teachers, administrators are doing on the ground every day. And the truth is that if we didn't have their public service, things might be even worse. So we deeply value the professionals that are showing up and doing the work every single day. But numbers don't lie. We can and we must do better. Second, I also wanted to share with you that we have an education crisis in terms of politics. So this is with the Team Blue hat on at the moment. You'll notice that, so the blue line is on top, the red line is on the bottom. Absent for 2015, you'll notice that in terms of voters' minds, Democrats have always held an advantage in voter trust on the issue of education. However, in the polls that we're doing now, you can see that that gap has steadily narrowed, and in fact, you see it widen right at the end. But that's actually, we're going to unpack that just a little bit. You'll see that that's not cause for celebration at the moment. In effect, what we're seeing is that the party that has always been seen as the party of education, at least in voters' minds, is no longer the party of education. Now, why have Republicans closed the gap on Democrats? First of all, on the Democratic side, the reality is that since about 2015, education policy, K through 12 policy, has frankly not been at the top of the agenda for our party. Now, I know that most education work is local, but the reality is also that when there is that national leadership, it makes a big difference. It sets the agenda, and it provides political cover whenever it's necessary. So we haven't had that national agenda around education. The second piece of why Republicans have closed the gap is that, frankly, it all started with the Glenn Youngkin election in Virginia, and then it was supercharged during COVID. So parents' rights, parent choice, et cetera. And, frankly, Republicans have stumbled onto something that is resonating with voters. And since the end of COVID, they've offered a broad vision based on private school choice that, as I mentioned, is resonating with voters at the moment. In the past couple of years, about 11 or 12 states have passed comprehensive ESA and voucher laws. The Koch brothers recently announced that by 2030, their goal is to have half of America with universal private school choice laws within their reach. And so they're on a tear. And throughout this time, over the last 3 years, there has been no Democratic alternative that has been offered or embraced. Now, this is not to say that some Democrats are not leading on education. There are several examples. Governor Polis, Governor Shapiro, who's a New Deal leader, Governor Moore, and many others in our states. But the reality is that that leadership is being dwarfed by what we're seeing on the other side. So I want to share with you some information from our latest poll. And frankly, this isn't even public anymore. It should be released later this week. So I mentioned that in the 2024 graph, there was a gap that Democrats were opening over Republicans. Well, we've unpacked that a little bit more. And it turns out that Democrats still hold an advantage over Republicans in terms of caring about education. But we don't hold an advantage, in fact, it's a 1-point advantage over Republicans, when voters ask, who do you trust to deliver on education? So we're seen as caring, but we're not seen as delivering. And this is in spite of the fact that the Biden administration has made historic investments in education. When I served as mayor, I certainly appreciated those investments, and certainly those investments, they helped me a great deal, et cetera. But what I can say with certainty is that it's not registering with voters. And then the last piece is, in terms of education, we are not tying our education vision to the issues that motivate people politically and motivate people to vote. When we ask folks, we all know that many folks vote on the economy. We ask them, what are the issues that most relate to whether you believe your children will have it better off than you? Number one answer currently is inflation. Number two answer is education. So there's a tight link to be made there. So I want to introduce our organization very, very briefly. I'm going to ask everyone who's here representing DFER to please stand for a quick moment. We have several folks throughout the room. All right, now that I've embarrassed them, thank you very much. We're going to be here throughout the day. Many folks will be here tomorrow. Please have a conversation, reach out to us. We want to build relationships and figure out how we can be supportive of the work that you're doing. So we live at the intersection of education policy and politics. Our superpower is in our structure and that of our partner organizations. We do C3 nonprofit work. Our partner organizations do C4 work. We get involved politically. We do independent expenditures on races that we really care about. We're bundlers. We have PACs throughout the country, et cetera. We have 7 chapter states. We also have an office in DC. We do a lot of outreach to the administration, both on the official and the unofficial side. And we, as an organization historically, have a track record of results. We do and move education policy through politics. Our model is really straightforward, and it's very similar to the New Deal. It's ideas plus champions equals impact. We believe that the right ideas with the right champions leads to real impact. Our policy pillars, what we stand for, look, we believe in whatever works. We believe in innovation, so we know what works. We believe in accountability, so we're only investing in what works. And we believe in public school choice so that families can decide for themselves what works. We pass legislation. We curate best practices. Our role is to accelerate the pace of replication. And we do strategic communication. We do a lot of polling. We provide messaging support as well. On the champion side, what we do is we build relationships with elected officials, and we support them with all the tools in our toolkit. That's on the policy side and also on the politics side. We do federal work, and we do state work as well. So before I finish, there is one communications piece that I really want to emphasize, and I look forward to speaking more about it during the panel. As a party, we must reframe and reset our relationship with choice. The reality is that choice resonates with voters, right? Choice resonates because of course it does. And in this debate, just as in virtually every public policy debate, we don't want to be on the side of limiting choice. Now, historically, choice in the education conversation has been virtually synonymous with charters. And as you know, the politics around charters has been very, very challenging within our party. And as an organization, we are not interested in having the same intra-party fight that we've been having for the last 15 to 20 years. The reality is that after all of the progress, and we do believe in public charter schools, but after all of the work and all of the progress, only about 7% of kids in America study at charter schools. And so for public education, we have to do work beyond simply the charter school space. And what we strongly suggest is a broad menu of public school options. And there's a lot to it. There's public charter schools, there's neighborhood schools. There's a question of inter-district choice, intra-district choice, universal enrollment. There's magnet schools, career academies, dual academy, Montessori schools. There is a lot to unpack and mine within the public school space. But we as a party in the education debate need to have our form of choice that aligns with democratic values. And this is an opportunity for us. In all of our polling, when we match or when we test private school choice versus public school choice wins 2-1 every single time. And what it has the capacity to do is also put us and other important stakeholder groups, such as teachers' unions, we're on the same side. We are protectors of the public education system. So just a couple next steps. If you are leading boldly or you want to lead boldly on education, we want to help you. And we can tailor our support to whatever your needs are. Sometimes it means being on the front lines, sometimes it means being entirely in the background. But a core part of our mission is to build relationships with elected leaders, such as yourselves, and I want to invite you to be part of our community. We're going to be hosting two convenings. One of them is going to be hosted this fall, and we're going to focus specifically on the southeast of the United States. We have a big national convening that's planned for February of 2025, which will be a call to action for our party around education. So, again, it is an absolute pleasure to be part of this group. I look forward to meeting all of you, and I look forward to a robust conversation in the panel that is to come. Thank you. Am I supposed to? All right. I'm going to invite all the panelists to please join me here on stage. I'm going to first ask my very, very good friend, former mayor of Parkland, Florida, and now a representative from Florida, Christine Hunschofsky. I'm also going to ask Massachusetts State Senator Pavel to also join us here on stage. And I also want to introduce you to a former elected official who is now the president for the Southeast region for our organization. Her name is Alisha Thomas-Searcy, who will be moderating the conversation.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Ooh, how many of you are from the South? Let me see. So you understand that I'm about to do that again, right? Because we like a little call and response in the South. So let me wake you up. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
There we go. Thank you for this opportunity to be here. Nothing gets me more excited than talking about kids and education. Raise your hand if education is your jam. Let me see who our people are. Okay, good. And so for the rest of you, perhaps economic development, economic empowerment, is that your jam? You raise your hand. Okay. The rest of you, you have kids and care about education, the future of our country? Yay. All right. Great. All right. So we've got a very important conversation this afternoon, and I want to introduce very briefly our other two panelists, and we'll, of course, be joined by our former mayor as well. I'm not going to read their entire bios. They are in the program. Check them out, because this conversation is important, and I need all the time we can have to get into it. So first, we have Senator Payano from Massachusetts, the son of immigrant Lawrencians, is that how you say that? Who dedicated decades to the LPS system. Massachusetts Senator Pavel Payano learned from a very young age the importance of hard work and the value of a quality education. Prior to his election to the state senate, the senator served the city of Lawrence for over a decade, first as a school committee member and most recently as a city councilor at large. He has experience working as a social worker for the Department of Transitional Assistance and as a professor at Merrimack College. Welcome, Senator. Welcome, Senator. Thank you. All right. And then we have Representative Christine Hunschofsky. Did I say it right? All right. She's my homegirl from Florida. I'm originally from Florida. She was elected to the City of Parkland Commission in 2013 and elected mayor in 2016. She led her city through the aftermath of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting in Parkland in 2018. Y'all remember that? Very difficult time. Additionally, the representative worked with the Broward County School Board and local developers to build additional elementary school space and promoted a buy local program to help small businesses. Christine was also elected to the Florida House of Representatives as a state representative for District 96 in November of 2020. Let's welcome Representative Christine. And then finally, you heard from Jorge. I'm just going to read a couple of things. As you know, he's a CEO of Education Reform Now, but before that served 2 terms as mayor of Providence, Rhode Island, where he undertook bold action towards social and racial justice agenda. This included taking the unprecedented step to engage the State Department of Education to turn around the city's chronically underperforming school system, creating the city's Eat, Play, Learn initiative to expand out-of-school enrichment, and launching a nationally recognized African American ambassador group to bring Black leaders into the center of policy making. And so again, we welcome the 3 of you. We are happy to have you, and want to jump right in. Jorge, you gave us some sobering, I would say, data on where we are as a country, particularly as Democrats, and how we've kind of lost footing. And so one of the things that I want to make sure that we do in this session is inspire and talk about ideas and best practices. As a former elected official, I understand what it means to take your time to come to a conference. You're interested in these issues, and you want to leave with some good ideas, some things you can get back on the plane and start talking to your team about. And so that's what the 3 of you will be tasked to do this afternoon as we talk about some of the most pressing issues in education. It is also my hope that we will all leave here with a real education agenda, if you didn't have one already. And so the first topic that I want to talk about, first let me ask this of the other 2 panelists. What do you make of this data that Democrats in particular have lost footing when it comes to how the country feels about our leadership in education? They understand that we care about education. People know that Democrats care, period. That's who we are. But we're not leading in terms of implementation, in terms of delivering on behalf of kids. What do you make of that in your own experiences in your legislature, and what can we do about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I think we do lead in education. I think some of it becomes how we talk about it today can't be how we used to talk about it. So we talk about how we support our public school teachers and making sure that we have teachers and how can we best support them. And it's not because we just care about teachers. It's because the student experience is far better when they have qualified, engaged, and supported teachers in the classroom. I think what Republicans have done well is talk about choice. From Florida, I would say the choice is only available to certain people who can afford to get their kids to the choice. And I think what we miss is talking about the families and the students. I've had discussions, some of them you've heard here, some of them we've had privately. People want to know, that's great that you're doing all these things and you stand for all these things, but how are what you doing, how will that affect my family? How will that affect my kids' opportunities in the future to have good jobs where they can afford to at least live as well as we're living now? And so when we talk about our traditional public schools and when we talk about the lifelines in our communities, we have to talk about it in a way that we're saying the end goal is for the families to have local choices so that their kids will have the best opportunities going forward in life. And that when we're supporting teachers and schools, it's not because we're supporting buildings and unions, which we are, but it's because we know that that will have the best impact on the kids and will give them the best chance to succeed in the future. Because in the end, that's what we all want.
Amen.
So I think as I heard that data, one of the things that I thought is like, wow, I'm really privileged to be in Massachusetts. In Mass, I think Democrats are leading in a lot of this. You know, we just passed landmark bill on access to early education and childcare. We're leading when it comes to making higher education more affordable or free for individuals. And when it comes to K-12 in 2010, and this is right about when I got started, 2010, 2011, we passed an education reform bill that allows the state to come in and take over schools that are underperforming. And because at the end of the day, what we want is good schools and a good education for our youth. And we just passed a few years ago the Student Opportunity Act that basically increases funding for urban school districts to try to match up what some of the wealthier communities are getting. And every year they're getting a little bit more to hopefully try to meet that gap. So in many ways we're doing that, and I think that at the end of the day, sometimes I engage in conversations with some of my Democratic colleagues where they talk to me about their feelings around charter schools, their feelings around standardized schools, and how in their school that they grew up, they just had this great education, and there was no need for any of this. And what I say to them is, wow, I'm extremely jealous that was your experience, but that wasn't my experience, and it's not the experience of the kids that I represent. And I say that being a former teacher, having a mom that served 30 years as a teacher and a dad that had 26 years as a teacher. There's a lot more that can be done, and I think that it is important that us as Democrats take on that fight, even if at times we have to look at the person next to us and say we disagree, because at the end of the day, the importance is that our youth, our kids, have access to all the opportunities possible so they're able to get a good career and reach that American dream.
Thank you for that. Jorge, I want you to jump in on this too, and then I'm going to focus on these particular policy issues that we want to get out there. But you've been in this role now for a year, and so you've had a chance to go around the country, talk to elected officials. What do you think needs to happen, or what are you telling sitting legislators and other elected officials about how we regain this trust from voters when it comes to education?
So two things come to mind. The first is the framing around choice. We can't be on the side of limiting choice. I would say in basically any debate, and it relates to this debate as well. And I shared my thoughts about it there. And then on the policy front, education is so complicated. It's so big, and it's so dynamic. There is no one answer. There's no one set of answers that is the solution. So I don't think any one of us have that answer. But I do have some thoughts on a process to get there. And our focus is to create a national community of elected ed reform champions that we support in any way that would help them be more successful in their advocacy. And I believe that by building up the language, the ideas, the policies, and the vision collectively, together, state by state, that the best ideas, and by best I mean both impactful but also politically viable, they rise to the top. And as an organization, we want to accelerate the pace of replication of those best ideas. And essentially, we want to be an incubator of those. I don't think there's any one person that can say these are XYZ, the steps that are required. But we do need to put more energy as a party into this debate because, let's talk about what is at stake. People, kids, communities are being left behind. And we're all in this because we want to make a difference in the world. And I can tell you that education kind of matters, right? And if we want to transform communities, I would argue that it begins with education. And as a party, we need to put the issue back on the front burner.
Agreed. Go ahead.
If I could just add, so in Broward County, one of the things that's been very popular in choice is our traditional public schools have these magnet programs now that have been incredibly popular, where students who are more into technology have an option to go to schools that are more technology driven, those who are more business driven. And it's really about thinking about what the kids need, whether they need special help in the classrooms, whether they have certain interests that will put them on the path. We have the IB programs, the Cambridge programs that are coming into the schools. There are so many ways to do choice. And then there are also, we have kids who won't go to college. And we've been working with junior achievement in our area to work on pre-apprenticeship programs. So students are graduating high school with certifications, and the employers are already at their certification at the junior achievement pre-apprenticeship program graduation. They have a job lined up at graduation that's an excellent job, an incredibly well-paid job. So these are not low-paid, low-skill jobs, quite the contrary. And it's about giving all kids opportunities for whatever their skills are and whatever their interests are. And that's where we can make such a big difference. Education, you know, it's like you got to learn this, and it goes back. I mean, I don't know when it all started with the programs that we have today, but we have to become more innovative, and we have to be willing to have those discussions. But we also have to be willing to support the resources that we need in order to make that happen, and that includes our teachers. That includes making sure that we have enough teachers. We have such a shortage in Florida now, and we have some of the worst pay, and that is not helpful to a quality education. I look back fondly. I had a public school choice when I went to Boston Latin School, and I remember teachers who saw things in me and believed in me when I didn't believe in me. So it's so important to not leave quality teachers out of this discussion, because we can't have quality education without the quality teachers.
Christine, I appreciate that. You literally covered every single issue that we're going to talk about, so thank you.
You're welcome.
So I want to jump in and talk about pathways for a second, and I want to come to you, Senator. We're in an interesting time in this country, right? We're talking about whether or not the education that we offer students right now is meaningful. When I think about what education looks like, and as you mentioned, you know, when it started in the 1800s, if you were to walk into a classroom today, there's not a lot that looks different, right? And so one of the things that I say is that we've got to stop offering this telegram education to a TikTok generation, right? We've got to completely shift what education looks like. Y'all like that one? If you quote it, just give me a little bit of credit for it, okay? And then on top of what education, the meaningfulness of education, right? There's a question around that. On top of that, we've got questions around the affordability of college, right? And should students go to college? And I think we've had all kinds of iterations of the relevance of college over the last probably 5 to 10 years. And so when we think about career education and pathways, there are a number of states, Georgia is one of them, where we're offering pathway educational programs in high school. So dual enrollment, right? You get college credit while you're in high school. You're able to choose a career path, right, as early as middle school if kids know what they want to do. And so can you all talk about, all three of you, I'm going to start with you, Senator, how you think career pathways ought to look in schools today, what best practices you have seen, whether it's in your states or others, from a policy standpoint. So if I'm a legislator, if I'm a mayor in this audience, and I want to know what I can do to make our education system more meaningful, I can provide these kinds of opportunities for students. What do I need to do in order to get there?
Great question. So I'll start off with when I first got on the school board, our school board, I was about 23 years old. And I remember thinking, you know, these folks, you know, what am I doing here? You know, I haven't finished my master's degree. And the first question that came up in my first meeting was the purpose of Lawrence High School, which was at the time, the public high school in the city, is to have the kids speak English. Now, I want to say my city is about 90% Latino. A lot of immigrants, I think 70% of the households are limited English. So it's to teach them English so they can work at McDonald's. Now, insane, right? So that was my first moment of leadership where I explained what the purpose of a public school system was, and it's told me that I needed to be more involved and present ideas. And I remember that first year, 23, I presented this idea of a program where we can take 10 to 20 kids, have them go to college, and have them, the classes that they take in college count for the high school diploma so they can get out with a year's worth of college. And I was laughed at by all those administrators. Fast forward, our school actually went into receivership, and I actually was in favor of that because it helped transform.
What does receivership mean, in case people don't know?
So receivership basically means that the state comes in and they hire a superintendent and give them the power of the school board. So they make a lot of the decisions almost unilaterally without the school board. But having someone there with those powers, that extra money and vision, he was able to take this idea and say, no, we're not going to do it for 10 kids. We're going to do it for 300 kids. So now there are close to more than 300 students that go to our community college and our private college, and they're taking credits, coming out with a year's worth of college, sometimes a year and a half, and they're pushing for 2 years so they can come out with an associate's. Right now, a public college, UMass Lowell, costs around $32,000, $34,000 a year. BU is $60,000 to $70,000. So this is saving families a lot of money. We are also doing. We started an After Dark program where we take the students that are interested in vocational training at our public schools but weren't able to get into vocational school. Now they get out a little bit earlier so they can take some classes and learn. We are also working on this program. I'm very excited. So my first year, when I first started, I remember speaking with the Senate president, and I come from a background where I started politics because of social justice issues and because I'm a deep believer that public education should be free for everyone. Now, I go into my first meeting, and I'm like, man, I don't want to sound like a radical here. So let me just, bring it down a little bit, and I say, Madam President, I'm a deep believer that we must ensure that public education is affordable and accessible for all people. And she says, yeah, but you know something? I think community college should be free for everyone. I'm like, yes, thank God. And sure enough, we've put money into that. We launched what's called Mass Reconnect, where if you're 25 or older, you're able to come back, and community college is for free. And now what the folks in the higher ed space have said is that a lot of the people that are coming in were able to get in using financial aid without using the state funding. They just didn't know they could. So it's been able to bring in a lot of people that didn't think that education was for them. And that in itself, I believe, is transforming lives. And we are pushing a lot to what former Mayor and Rep talked about, apprenticeship programs, and ensuring that the trades are seen as a viable opportunity, not just for our youth, but for our young adults as well.
Thank you. Representative.
Yeah, so I think I hit on a little bit of it earlier. There's also now a requirement that you have to start in middle school in the public schools of letting the students know and their families know what other business groups or what other pathways are available to them in different areas. I think the earlier you start, the better. Some of the discussions we've actually had, I'm also on our Commission on Mental Health and Substance Use Disorder, and in behavioral health, we're having a workforce issue. I think is also working with the different businesses in the area about having paid internships for a lot of these students, because people don't see a career if they don't see that they can afford to work in that space. So some of the things we're working on, that's more on the university level. We have this amazing Bright Futures program in the state of Florida where if you score a certain amount and you have a certain GPA, your tuition is covered at a state university. And very recently, for those kids who can't afford to have all the volunteer hours because they have to work and they have to make money while they're in high school, we're now counting those work hours toward the volunteer hours that are required. Which is excellent. Yes, thank you to the person snapping. Appreciate it.
Go ahead and applaud. It's okay.
Having said that, you also have to have businesses so that the students will have a place to work. One of the concerns I have in the state of Florida is we're having these kids graduate, and then the jobs that they're looking for aren't in our state, whether it's technology, and in different areas where we can really grow. So it's important to have the pathways, it's important to have the access, but it's also important to have those partnerships with the businesses, because a lot of, in my opinion, we can do a lot at the state level, and we have in many ways, but a lot of it is with your local leaders creating those partnerships and connecting those bridges, building those bridges between your community schools and your local chambers and your businesses, so that everybody's kind of working together. We have great career days now at a lot of our schools. We have a lot more participation with some of our charitable organizations that are helping out in the schools as well in order to help with mentoring children. I think that's really important. Again, I go back to teachers who saw things in me that I didn't see in myself when I was younger. There is nothing like mentorship. There is no replacement for people coming into the schools and telling kids and seeing in kids the potential they have, letting them know that potential they have. Because a lot of what we do in life, it is about what we think is possible. And we're usually going to set our standard and our goal with what we think we can achieve. And imagine if you don't think you can achieve much, but somebody who you respect is from the community comes in and lets you know that they think you can achieve it. So I think there are a lot of things we can do. I think it takes government on all levels. I think government on all levels have different roles to play, but it has to be local, it has to be state, it has to be all the stakeholders coming together, wanting our children to succeed. Because if our children don't succeed, the other option, the opposite of opportunity, is not good for our students, it's not good for our families, and it's not good for our communities.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Speaking of local communities and what local officials can do, Mayor?
So I wanted to build off of Senator Pavano's comment. So, Senator, I didn't know that when you were on the school board, you were in support of receivership. And I just want to highlight how remarkable that is. Being in favor of receivership means that you basically give up all say and all control. But my guess is that you did that because the crisis in the schools was to such an extent that you needed some kind of radical transformation to deliver for kids. You know, to everyone who's doing this work throughout the country right now, and I just want to emphasize that the delta between what our kids deserve and what they're getting today in terms of opportunity, it's a vast gap. The delta between what we can be doing and what we're actually doing, there is a vast gap. And you know, frankly, I'm of the strong opinion that we need some radical ideas. You know, nipping at the margins, at the edges, it's just not going to get it done. One of my intellectual idols, James Baldwin, he has this interview where he's talking generally about civil rights, and he makes the point that you asked my mother to wait. You asked my father, my uncles, and my aunts to wait. You asked me to wait. You asked my wife to wait, my cousins to wait. And now you're asking my children to wait? No. And I'm supposed to wait because now you mean it? And somehow this reality that has never existed is somehow going to come apart because you really mean it? No. And I believe that applies to our moment in education right now. When have our public schools delivered for low-income black and brown kids? I mean, there are examples here and there, sites, but in terms of school districts and school systems, when has that ever happened? And so, as an organization, we are very interested in, Senator Payano, Alisha actually makes this point all the time. Alisha is a former elected official. She served and led on education issues in Georgia for 12 years. And the way that she says it is, in this organization, we are trying to create exactly what we wished existed when we were in office. And this is an invitation. If you're looking to lead boldly on education, we want to be helpful with the tools that we have. We have, if I may say, perhaps the best policy shop of any organization in the country, led by Charlie Barone, who's here. Charlie has either drafted or helped to draft every major federal education policy bill for the past 25 years. We have great people in our policy shop. We could be helpful. We have Harrison Farnsworth, who's going to be giving a presentation tomorrow. He runs all of our polling, all of our research, all of our data. If we can help, give you a sense of what voters believe and what they think about different issues in your districts, if we can help with messaging, if we can help with policy, and as I mentioned, we do politics as well. If we can help, we want folks to know that if you're doing right by kids, we got your back. If we can help in any of these ways, we want to be there to help. Because, Senator, you were mentioning earlier that you were a young man fresh out of college, you entered this position, and you were getting you had to walk through picket lines, you're getting yelled at, mistreated. It's a lonely place when you're leading and you're doing the right thing. And we just want to let you know that we got your back throughout that process.
Thank you. And what I'll add to that is that it's lonely until people see the outcomes. So I remember that year, my friends who were teachers were the ones that pushed me to run, because I didn't really want to run for school board. And after a while, they were saying, hey, I can't put up pictures of you on Facebook because I'm being attacked by my other colleagues, because they did not like the way that I was moving. I remember I had one really strong conversation with a friend of mine, one of my best friends, that was very heated on his end. And then about 6 years later, he comes up to me. I've forgotten this conversation. And he says, I want to apologize. You were right. I'm like, about what? And then he explained, the conversation is at the moment, I just couldn't see it. Now looking in, I think that was the best step that we could have taken. So sometimes you might not make friends with certain people, but you end up creating a whole lot more allies. And I think the community as a whole ends up seeing that could work.
Thank you for that. We're going to open up for questions. I do have a question about supporting teachers that we're going to get to, but we want to open up and see if there are any questions in the audience. I love it.
Hey, Andrea McClellan, Norfolk City Council. I'm curious if there's any data that reflects community involvement and support in outcomes. And I say that because in Norfolk, in our public schools, we have a hell of a time with volunteers who want to help and the school system allowing them to help. And I don't know if anybody else is experiencing that, but I think we have so much talent in our communities, retirees, et cetera, who can provide the mentorship, who could provide all sorts of internships, et cetera. And there needs to be a connection. And I don't know if that's state legislation. I don't know if it's local. I don't know if there's data available. But it's an area, that public engagement piece, that really, really grinds me. So I was just curious your perspective on that.
Anybody want to jump in?
So what I would say, I think on the local level, there's if you have good leadership within your schools, they can find creative ways. I think the idea of gathering a lot of volunteers in one place, which is the bureaucracy of managing all that. So it becomes, because it looks like it's added work, you tend to stay away from that. But if you can get a nonprofit to say, hey, I will take ownership of whatever the volunteer piece is, then the school is more likely to accept it. So for example, we had, right after COVID, there were a lot of issues going on with kids not getting along with each other. The 7th and 8th grade, they missed, you stepped on my sneaker. Like, how do you engage in a conversation? That to us might be like, what? But to them, they didn't go through middle school. They were absent from these sort of, there were some youth that just stayed at home and weren't able to really connect with their friends. So we had a lot of those issues, a lot of violence, and there were a lot of parents that wanted to get involved. The school didn't necessarily want random people in that area, so they partnered up with an organization, and for a period of about 9 months, they would always have volunteers, parents basically, standing in different places when school was getting out and when school was coming in. So that might be an idea that you might want to take.
If I could just add on to that too, when I went to school, I'm 54, just for everybody, so I'm going to say it. There wasn't as much expected of the schools in some ways like there is today. Schools are supposed to be your medical, you're supposed to be able to get medical treatment there, you're supposed to be able to get mental health treatment there, you're supposed to be getting all your meals there, they're supposed to help as like the social bridge, because that's the one place where you can kind of, where the students are and you have the most access to the families in that sense. So I do think a lot of partnership with your local charitable groups and different agencies is very helpful, because I think there is, in many ways, more of a burden on schools today than there, and more requirements to provide various services than there was in the past.
Thank you for that. Any other questions in the audience at the moment? So I want to talk about teachers for a moment. Oh, here's one. Yes.
Yes, hi, Michael Lexton. I have a question, Jorge, for you, specifically relative to messaging. You had mentioned the multiple choices of public school choice and how it's a wide variety of things. And I feel that on the other side of the House, you have the Koch brothers and Jeff Yass giving millions of dollars to Republicans because they have one message, and that's charter schools and ESAs, and we need to have more of that. And that's a very clear, distinct message that a lot of people buy into. And so what is the Democrat message that has to go out relative to choice?
Thank you for the question. So, as I mentioned, the Republican message is a very clear one. It's private school choice. Maybe 10, 15 years ago, the Republican message was charter schools, but they've moved further to the right. And I don't want to say they've abandoned charter schools, but the focus has been vouchers and ESAs. And actually, just let me pause for a second to explain what ESAs are. So I think we all know what a voucher is. An ESA is the exact same thing. It's just a question of, does the money follow the child directly as a voucher, as it does with a voucher? Indirectly as it does with a voucher? Or does it, I think I'm mixing it up. Yeah, everyone knows what a voucher is. What an ESA does, an education savings account, the public money goes to the parent, and then the parent decides how to spend it on education. They're effectively the same thing, so vouchers and ESAs. So the Republican message has been very clear, private school choice. And as I mentioned, there just simply hasn't been an alternative. Now, our party, it seems we're still fighting the choice versus no choice debate, which means we're still fighting the charter versus no charter debate. But on the question of choice broadly, that debate's been had, that debate's been settled. All the public opinion polling that we do show that voters overwhelmingly support choice. Of course, everyone wants high quality options available, particularly when they're free, their civil rights protections, et cetera. So choice resonates, and as a party, we need to embrace that and or acknowledge that. And what we're advocating for is that we define, that we create a form of choice that aligns with our values. And I think public school choice does that. For many folks, investing in the neighborhood schools is exactly what they want and what we need to do. There are a lot of folks particularly at the elementary level, that it makes sense for your child to go to school right around the block and to be that supportive community. For other folks, it might be that it's much more convenient for you to send your child to the school right around from where you work. Or there might be a magnet school or vocational training that just makes more sense for you as a family. And so the message that that we're carrying to party leaders is, let's not reject choice. Rather, let's embrace choice, but define it in a way that aligns with our values. And you know, there's some really interesting work happening right now around what's called open enrollment. There's a campaign, there's a movement across the country to eliminate school district borders. Interestingly enough, it's led by mostly center-right organizations. The idea is that, look, throughout the country we have school districts whose boundary lines have effectively been, or were effectively drawn by discriminatory housing policies of the past. And we're locking in those discriminatory effects by locking families into what schools they can go to. And so that's a coalition that we're a part of as well, trying to break down these lines and allow kids to go to any public school within the state, and providing transportation and accessibility and making sure it's free to everyone. So there's a lot there to mine, but I think that it's just really important for us to reframe and reset our relationship around choice.
And if I could just add on to that, and this is why it's just so important to go out into the community, your community, other people's communities, wherever you can go to talk to people who are having all sorts of different experiences. When you talk about choice and you say you're against choice, for the people who live in a district where the only school their kids can go to is a D or less school, what choice have you given them? And how are they supposed to feel about you feeling their child doesn't deserve any more than that? As a mom, and my kids are older now, but there is nothing I would not have done to give my kids the best opportunity. And I wouldn't expect any other parent, any other mother or father to think their child deserves any less than any other child deserves.
Thank you on that. What I'll say is, I think that there are different solutions depending on where you're from. So I can't speak to any other state. I know that in my area, I'm actually not a supporter of vouchers. But around this time, I get a lot of families, because this is a time when families are applying to put their kids in private school, high school, middle or elementary. So this is like usually when the conversation starts, and there are individuals that are asking about this. And what I point at is to sort of what you just mentioned, the different choices that they have available. In our city, we have multiple charter schools. We have about 4 charter schools that do an excellent job. We actually took a page from your alma mater, Boston Latin, and we created our own exam school within the high school. And I also talked to parents on the growth that has happened, that these schools are not the same schools that you went to school into, right? And show them what whether the high school, the middle school, the things that they are doing to shift and change and improve the education within that area. And I'm not going to say that it works all the time, but for most of the times, they're like, oh, I did not know that. They didn't know that there was a vocational school available for them if the kids wanted to get into trades, and how we're expanding all sorts of opportunities like that. So I think the more resources and educations we're able to give the parents so they can make the right decisions for the youth, the better. But if we are doing the work of providing all these choices and providing and creating policies to make sure that we are reforming our public school system, then the parent is probably not going to want to take their kids out of public education if public education is working for them. And that point that you mentioned at the end, that's a conversation that I have a lot with my colleagues that don't understand, like, oh, like, why can't, why would somebody want to go to a different school? And it's like, until you lived it and you've seen what it's like. Now, I had great teachers, but I also was in a school district that was not just underperforming, but was deeply, deeply underfunded. So how can I could have had the best teachers in the country if we were spending, I think it was something like $15,000 less per kid than Cambridge. How can you expect that our education system is going to be the same?
And if I could just add on, like, our traditional public schools have amazing magnet programs. So choice doesn't mean you go private. I mean, we ended up having these vouchers for all in Florida, not this past session, the one before, where we found it was being taken advantage of or being used by a lot of people who were already sending their kids to private school, and now they were just getting a discount on the private school, and some homeschoolers who were going to Disney with the. So, I mean, that's not fiscally responsible, nor is that heading toward the goal of better education. But we have a bunch of magnet schools in Broward County, and they have that open enrollment period where you can choose to go to these schools that are specializing in STEM, are specializing in arts, or specializing in music or business or whatever. And I love that our county school district has really said, we're listening to the parents. It's not a one-size-fits-all. And we are going to work on giving our families choices that are still within the traditional public school system. So I think we just need to talk about it in a way that we're hearing from the people we serve.
Yes. We've got one final question.
I'll try to be brief, and hopefully I don't open up a can of worms around debates, but.
Too late.
Sorry, okay. So the macro theories of school choice make sense, but I think in practice is a bit nuanced, because you kind of talked about school choice within the public school system, and then you sort of talked about school choice outside of the public system, and I think that's fine, and I think families should have choice to send their children wherever they want to send them. But then, what happens to that D school that you're talking about? Because what happens is parents that are knowing of choices, whatever those choices may be, their students, their children typically go to other schools, but then there's that cadre of students that still end up going to that D school. And so school choice is great, but I think there's still a conversation to be had about what do you do with these failing schools, or what do you do with failing school systems or failing school districts? In the case of New York City, it's very large, the largest public school system. And so just wondering your thoughts on that, because school choice, great. The theory sounds wonderful and I agree with it, but the practice of it is quite nuanced and complicated, and it isn't as easy to just say we're just offering school choice and not really being intentional about where resources are being put into the education system.
So 1,000%, and you're not opening a can of worms. This is I agree with you. I mean, how do some of the schools end up being D schools? Often it is a lack of investment, and I'll be very clear, our traditional public schools in many ways are the lifeline of our communities. It's where a lot of kids get the resources they need, the extra help they need, the services they need that aren't provided in every type of school. And I think we do have to be careful to make sure choice is available to everybody, including the people who might not have an opportunity to choose another school, whether it's a transportation issue, whether they can't get there, it's just not viable for them to be going further away from home. And so you are 100% correct. Choice doesn't mean we should be giving up on our community schools. If anything, part of the choice is also to have quality community schools that are also a choice in this whole framework.
So what I would say, so I think
30
it's
seconds, because we're supposed
Oh,
to be.
30 seconds. Great question. I think that there's a role to be played. You have to fund your schools correctly. You have to put policies in place that allows you to look into what our school districts are doing and allow, whether it's the community or the state or whoever, to basically help transform and reform. And if you do, like in Mass, we don't do like vouchers for private schools. But we talk a lot about traditional public schools and public charter schools, and our public charter schools are actually public. If you're doing it right, and the public schools are learning from some of the innovation happening in the charter schools, I think that you create a system where they're both pushing each other to excel and succeed. But at the end of the day, you have to make sure that your traditional public schools are being funded the way they should be. And in most of the places that are urban schools, they're not.
I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank our audience members for your questions. And I just want to close with a couple of thoughts. I don't want us to lose some of the great ideas that we heard around pathways. We talked about dual enrollment. We talked about free community college, paid internships. One of the things that you mentioned, it's so important for kids to see, right, in order for them to really be. And so as I close, I'm grateful for this conversation that really shifted a lot towards public school choice. And given my experience, and Jorge mentioned this, I'm a former state legislator from Georgia, spent a lot of time working on education reform in general, but as soon as you are a Democrat and you support charter schools, like, you deal with the thing. And so I just want to encourage both of our organizations to continue this conversation about public school choice. I believe that when you support public school choice, you are espousing the values of a Democrat. It's about leveling the playing field. It's about making sure that you are not stuck with a system that does not work for you because of the zip code that you're from. It does not have to mean that we are abandoning the public school system, because none of these schools work unless all of the schools work, right? And if I want to have choice as a parent, I want to actually choose between high quality public schools. And at the end of the day, parents don't really care what the school is called. They just want a great school to send their kids to. And so if we are going to take back the ownership of education in this country as Democrats, these are the kinds of conversations we have to have so that we understand how to message about choice, that we understand very clearly that we are not abandoning public schools or kids that may be, quote unquote, stuck in a D school, but that our job is to make sure that all kids have access to a high quality education. And so I want to leave you with my favorite quote. It's by Dr. Benjamin E. Mays. It says that every person is born into this world to do something distinctive and something unique. And if he or she doesn't do it, it will never be done. We have a responsibility, whether you are elected, appointed, you work with elected officials, to shape public policy that works for all kids, all families. And as Dr. Mays reminds us, if we don't do it, it will never be done. Amen. Thank you.